It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of 4th of July weekend 2004. We're at the halfway point of the year, and we've got 5 movies to look at, but no movie is bigger and probably more significant than our first movie that we have here, and that is, of course, the sequel to Sam Raimi's breakthrough hit, Spider-Man. Of course, it's called Spider-Man 2. So how many of you were like you when you saw that trailer for the first time and you saw that scene where Harry pulls off the mask? How many of you thought that that was not going to be Peter Parker underneath it? You thought maybe that Peter was going to put like a dead body there or something, maybe for a cruel, dark joke, put the dead body of his father there. But I mean, it is a Sam Raimi movie. It wouldn't be that surprising if he went for a little bit of some dark comedy there. But no, of course, that was actually him in the actual movie. So it's kind of a spoiler for the film itself, but because this movie is so good, it really takes away from the fact that it really does become because of an issue that's not as important as the movie itself, because the movie Spider-Man 2 is pretty damn good. I mean, at this point, this was Marvel at their absolute best, and it's really not that hard to see why. You have a story that's set 2 years after the events of Spider-Man, where Peter Parker has struggled to manage both his personal life and his duties as Spider-Man. And he's introduced to Dr. Otto Octavius, played by Alfred Molina, who takes a turn for the diabolical following a failed experiment with his wife's death. Using his mechanical tentacles, Octavius is dubbed Dr. Octopus and threatens to endanger the lives of New York City's residents. And Spider-Man must stop him from annihilating the city, but also going through these different situations, dealing with Harry, of course, dealing with Mary Jane, who's getting married to this guy who it feels like they were trying to set up as Venom, but it never really went anywhere. But a lot of the majority of the plot elements are taken from the Spider-Man story arc, Spider-Man No More, which was based off of the 1967 Amazing Spider-Man story. And much like with Blade 2 and X-Men 2, all the flaws in Spider-Man 2 are not only fixed in here, but they boost the movie to make it, at that point, Marvel's strongest sequel they had done at one of the best superhero movies ever made. I mean, keep in mind, this was just a couple of years before the MCU really took off and showed what Marvel can really do with a major with a good comic adaptation. I mean, this was at a good point in time to be at. It benefits from having a more prominent direction from Sam Raimi, who's been a longtime Spider-Man fan and gets the chance to show he wants to make the Spider-Man movie he wanted to see, and it definitely shows on here. Which makes no sense why they decided to screw him over with the third film, but we'll get to that one eventually. But great cast again. You know, Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man, Kirsten Dunst, Mary Jane Watson, James Franco, newcomers Alfred Molina is very good as Doc Octopus. We get a lot of character development out of all these characters, and with a sequel, we need to get further development on those characters so we can get a better purpose of liking them and seeing their story continue from the previous film. Everything is much bigger in this film, but what a good sequel should do, like a story, the plot that's much bigger, and it senses that there's a lot at stake this time around that there was in the first movie. We can go along with it and hope the hero comes out as the victor. The third act, I think, is great. It's one of the strongest third acts I've ever seen for a movie, where there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of surprises, there's a sense of danger in all aspects, and also sides of people that you never expect to see, especially during the subway scene where everybody sees Peter as who he is, and they could have easily just said, "Hey, this is Spider-Man, right? This kid is Spider-Man," but no, they're just like, you get hit, but no, they're protective of him, and it's very refreshing too, because New Yorkers always get a bad rap in general. Maybe they do. I've never been to New York. I've wanted to visit New York before in my life. I've wanted to visit New York before, but I've never gotten the chance to. But this movie at least tries to show that, hey, not everybody in New York is a complete asshole. Whether that's real life is hard to tell, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to say here. Quite frankly, Spider-Man 2 does give you everything you want in the sequel and then some. A bigger story, bigger character development, a story that we could stick and get behind. It was at that point where Marvel was really at the peak of what they could do as a studio in general, with these studios behind them, and it made for one of the best superhero movies ever made. And I think it really opened the door for a lot of people for what comic book movies can really be, because the following year, Christopher Nolan would take what Spider-Man 2 did and take it to the next level with Batman, but we're about a year away from that, of course. But Spider-Man 2 is a great movie. I can't recommend it enough. Definitely check it out. So with that said, let's get to some of the smaller movies. Some smaller movies, but some notable movies that came out to compete with Spider-Man 2 in the limited market. I mean, not everybody was going to get to see it because everyone wanted to go see it. So here's a couple movies that tried to go and compete with Spider-Man 2 and mostly succeeded for the most part. Let's start with the first one. And Harry Osborn's father, Willem Dafoe, isn't too far away because he's in the next movie. We have Robert Redford and Helen Mirren, along with Willem Dafoe, in The Clearing. And just like in the last Spider-Man movie, Willem Dafoe's the villain in here. After decades of a happy marriage and a life surrounded by luxury and wealth, Robert Redford plays a successful car rental businessman with his lovely wife Eileen, played by Dame Helen Mirren, and they're looking forward to a tranquil and comfortable retirement. However, the dreams of a peaceful life come tumbling down like a house of cards when at gunpoint, Arnold Mack, played by Willem Dafoe, a disgruntled former employee, abducts Wayne in broad daylight right in front of his mansion in Pittsburgh. Suddenly, the fate of the accomplished entrepreneur and seasoned negotiator rests entirely in the hands of his nervous yet ruthless kidnapper, who has nothing to lose and everything to gain. This is Wayne's most important negotiation in his life, but he had the strength to succeed. Maybe Wayne did, but this movie didn't. This film did not get the best reviews in general and didn't really do a whole lot at the box office, bringing in about $12.5 million for a film that has a cast that includes Robert Redford, Helen Mirren, Willem Dafoe. You expect a whole lot bigger and better than this, but unfortunately, the film really doesn't really go to those levels that it should with a cast this good. That was another the event for a television director making his big screen debut, Peter John Brugge, who is mostly associated with television, but he's also been known as a producer too. He's produced a lot of things, including most notably Breaking 2, Electric Boogaloo. That was the film he started off with. Then he did stuff like Heat, Bulworth, The Insider, Consenting Adults, Fatal Instinct. Like, he produced a lot of different movies overall, and this was his first attempt as a director, and his last attempt, because I don't think he directed. I'm pretty sure he didn't direct anything else of noteworthiness since this. No, he did not. He just went back to producing after this, but he's done a lot of work in television and movies, and there's possibilities for what he could do as a director, but it needed a better story to work with here. We've seen this type of story done before numerous times. You know, the guy that takes somebody else out into the middle of the woods to go out and try to kill him or something like that. The Edge was like that with Alec Baldwin and Sean Connery. And here, I think it takes itself way too seriously. There's a lot of times in this movie where it really does feel like they are just begging hard for that Academy Award for these actors, and it just doesn't work in general. And it's a shame because there's a lot of good talent here. There's an idea that maybe could work here, but unfortunately, the film goes down as about as predictable of a route as you could possibly get, and it really hurts the movie in the long run. It's just not a very good movie, man. It's just not a very good film indeed, So that is The Clearing. Let's go ahead and move on to the next movie. Kevin Kline and Ashley Judd in the musical biopic DeLovely. Well, the music might be DeLovely, but the movie is, again, kind of like The Clearing, not so much. DeLovely is an original musical portrait of American composer Cole Porter, played by Kevin Kline, filled with unforgettable songs. And in the film, Porter is looking back on his life as if it was one of his spectacular stage shows, with the people and events of his life becoming the actors in action on stage. Through elaborate production numbers and popular hits like Anything Goes, It's DeLovely, Night and Day, Porter's elegant, excessive past comes to light, including his deeply complicated relationship with his wife and muse, Linda Lee Potter, played by Ashley Judd. Directed by Irwin Winkler, who is another one, kind of like Peter John Brugge. He's a great producer, but as a director, he has not been as successful as he probably could be. I mean, there's a lot of movies he's made that we've talked about on the show. We talked about all of his movies: Guilty by Suspicion, Night in the City, The Net, At First Sight, Life is a House. None of these movies were really groundbreaking films in general, and there's definitely a lot of what you could do with this film in general, especially with Kevin Kline as Cole Porter. Kevin Kline will usually turn anything into something great, even if it's not that great of a movie. But here, it really just feels like they're just trying to create a new generation Amadeus. That's the thing that I always kept thinking of when I saw this movie. It's just like, it feels like this is Cole Porter's Amadeus. I think it's like Cole Porter's Amadeus, and it just really is not that great of a film that wastes a lot of really good talent in this movie. Like you see it in the trailer there, who's involved with the soundtrack for this movie. You know, you got Robbie Williams, Alanis Morissette, Sheryl Crow, Elvis Costello, you know, Diane Krall, like Natalie Cole. You got Natalie Cole in this movie, man, and like, yeah, it just feels like the movie was trying to sell just the performances alone instead of actually selling the movie and selling a story that could be told in a much better light. I think it has been done told in a much better version with Night and Day, which starred Cary Grant back in the day. I haven't seen the whole thing, but I can tell you that it's what they did there. From what I saw of it, was definitely a lot better than what I saw here, and it pains me to say that because I do like Kevin Kline a lot. I do like Ashley Judd a lot, but unfortunately, the movie itself is just pretty much your typical. It's not even your typical musical biopic, like a modern, like what a musical biopic is nowadays. It's just kind of like, it's an ambitious idea, but it just can't get past the feeling that they're trying so hard to create the next Amadeus. It felt like, because there's a lot of elements of Amadeus there. You know, Cole Porter talking about his life back in the day, and like talking about the muses and the memories of his young life in general. But it just really feels that way. It feels like there's so much more that could be done here, and it just doesn't deliver when it's all said and done. And it's a shame because the pieces are definitely there. There's an engaging story here, but it just didn't work in the long run, unfortunately. So yeah, with that said, let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, and that is the sequel to Before Sunrise, Before Sunset. You know, Richard Linklater having himself a pretty good year in general with School of Rock coming out just 6 months beforehand. Then he comes up with the sequel to Before Sunrise here, and if you remember Before Sunrise, it's the story about these two people who reunite in they go to Vienna and spend a whole day together, and they never see each other again. But in this movie, it's them reuniting 9 years later in Paris, and it's pretty much the same movie again, but you know, it's just, I've talked about this trilogy in written form on the website, but these movies really are amazing, man. Like the fact that they can do pretty much the same thing that they did in the last movie, but they do it so well to, you know, because now it's been 9 years. It's been 9 years since the last movie we saw these two together. You know, things have changed. They've gone on to these relationships. They've gone on to have these different things, and then they say, you know, let's just spend the day together, and you're spending the day with them. It's kind of like, it's the equivalent of something like My Dinner with Andre or Midnight in Paris, a movie that just, it doesn't really have to do a whole lot because you like the characters that you have to deal with here, even though they're just mostly two people for the most part. And Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy just work off each other so well, and it just plays so beautifully for what they're trying to go for here in the film. And they also use their own real-life situations to this. But, you know, Ethan Hawke, you know, he had just gotten through a divorce with Uma Thurman, and they came together. They incorporated elements of their lives into the screenplay, and that's the beautiful thing about the film in general, is that it takes place in real time. It doesn't have to do anything too big or too extravagant to really keep you invested in what's going on. And that's the beautiful thing about the movie in general, is that you could just sit there watching these two getting back together and just talking about where they've been in the last 10 years, and you get so attached to it, and you get so invested in what they're doing because you like these characters a lot. I mean, like I said before, it's like My Dinner with Andre. I mean, you're just sitting there watching these two guys talking about life and the world itself and like all these problems they have, but you're so fascinated by it because the characters are really interesting. Their situations they're talking about are very interesting, and you're so hooked to what they're talking about. And in this case, you've got that plus the beautiful scenery of Europe in general, like where the places that they go to here. It's an incredible film. It's a really wonderfully put together movie. This trilogy as a whole is absolutely amazing. The fact that they've done 3 of these movies, and they all still have the same. They still have all the same idea to them, but they're so investing because it is pretty much kind of you know what it also reminds me of, now that I think about it? You ever see the Up series where they talk in the 1960s? You got this director talking to these 7 kids in general at 7 years old, and they keep following them every 7 years. Like you'll have 14 up, 21 up, 28, 30, 35. That's how there's the 42, 49. You get the idea. You get so invested with these characters with these people because you know you've been following them since the very beginning when they were 7 years old and they got taken part of this documentary. And, you know, after all these years later, those documentaries still hold up to this very day. that's what this kind of reminds me of. Every couple of years, you meet these people up again. You meet up with these people again. You want to know what they've been doing these last couple of years, and you really get invested. Like I said, with how these people have done in the last almost 10 years. I mean, it's a really engaging film, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but these are just great movies in general, and movies that I don't think get the proper attention they deserve. They're really terrific films. It just shows how much Richard Linklater can do as a director as a whole, because he can make these mainstream movies like School of Rock and then Bad News Bears, but you remember he's still pretty good at directing independent stuff like this and Dazed and Confused and Everybody Wants Some, these smaller movies. Boyhood is another example of a movie that feels like it's going to take the same route as the Before Sunrise series, where they'll meet each other again in about, 20? I think the original film was like 12 years. I think it's just going to be, I think they're trying to do a sequel where they do the same thing for the next 12 years, but I don't know for certain, but that's another great movie too, and yeah, what more could I say about this movie that hasn't already been said? It's just a really, really amazing film. These movies are criminally underrated films. I highly recommend checking them out because they are indeed worth it. Before Sunset, definitely the pick of the week easily, besides Spider-Man 2, of course. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to our last movie here, which is a Disney documentary called America's Heart and Soul. Because of course you're going to release a movie like this on 4th of July weekend. If you release it on like Canadian Thanksgiving, it would seem kind of off and weird, but I don't know. Part of this does look like something that Fox News probably would do nowadays, but Disney did it first, and I guess I feel like they were trying to do this to counter-program Fahrenheit 9/11, which they had under Miramax, but then, of course, the Weinsteins took it somewhere else. But this is a documentary about America, which they describe as a vast country, 3,000 miles from end to end, but it's not the land that makes America so special, it's the people, which is true. Filmmaker Louis Schwartzberg packs up his camera and hits the road with the goal of capturing both the unparalleled beauty of the land and the incomparable spirit of the people. He connects with people, capturing their values, dreams, and passions in a journey that reveals the stories unusual, captivating, inspiring, and emotional that makes Americans into something more than a collection of individuals. It's a celebration of a nation told through the voices of its people. Which I guarantee if you do this 20 years from now, America, the way they find America, and this is going to feel a whole lot different than this movie is. Which I wanted to bring this up because I haven't seen this movie, but there is an interesting story about Disney and America and what they were going to do. If you've ever seen Defunctland, there's a great video that goes into this in complete detail about how Disney was going to open up this area in Virginia called Disney's America. This was something that was in part of the Michael Eisner Disney decade that never really went anywhere. And it would have consisted of 9 different distinctly themed areas, featured hotel, housing, golf course, nearly 2 million square feet of retail and commercial development. It was an idea that was supposed to be much smaller than the Disney theme parks, but it was a $650 million project and was supposed to open in '98. And they had initial support, but it faced a lot of opposition from citizens groups and historians who objected to Disney's planned portrayal of historical events, and especially considering that this was around the time that Euro Disney was not doing so well, was actually a bust. Not to mention the death of Frank Wells, the head of the company, rising costs, the prospects of reduced profits, with the park being closed for 4 months each year. Yeah, it basically never happened, and it really was one of those things, one of those first real moments where Disney, who was having a hot streak, was starting to feel like the pressure was getting to them, especially for Michael Eisner, who, after Frank Wells died, kind of really fell off of what made him so promising in the original first decade of his tenure. But, of course, Knott's Berry Farm tried to retheme and revive the concept, and that didn't really go anywhere in general. But, and eventually they did put some elements to it in Disney's California Adventure in 2001 when that opened up. But I wanted to bring that up because that was something that is very much not related to this movie in general. But I thought that was kind of an amusing story, and I kind of butchered it in some way, shape, or form. But if you do want to know more about it, I'll put a link to Defunctland's video he did on this a couple years ago, because it does a much better job of talking about what this America could have been like. But as far as this documentary goes, it's nothing I really remember. I mean, it's something that I only saw like a ad for it in the newspaper. Never had any real intention of seeing it, which I never did. But this looks kind of generic. And like I said, it does feel like something that Fox News probably would produce nowadays for Fox Nation. But, I mean, this is something that Disney did back in the day, and it didn't really leave much of a lasting impact, and kind of like faded into obscurity not too long after it came out. So yeah, not much more to say about that one because I haven't seen it. So that is America's Heart and Soul by Disney. And so with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. We'll head into July 9th on the next episode with 3 notable movies, including Will Ferrell as Ron Burgundy in Anchorman: The Legend of Ron Burgundy, Clive Owen, Keira Knightley in King Arthur. We also have Alexa Vega in the kids' comedy Sleepover. So we'll take a look at those 3 films all on the next episode, so don't miss that. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the plays on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So, with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.